whose limited seating he reserved exclusively for the ship's officers, the territorial governor, and their families. In this stunning display of incompetence in a crisis, it's hard not to see parallels to our own day. The captain consigned nearly half of the ship's passengers, civilians and lesser seamen, to the poorly built raft. Although it had originally been built as a place to stow the cargo, instead he loaded it up with people, lots and lots of people. It was rickety and rode half underwater, and its size, 66 feet long and 23 feet wide, almost exactly the width of Géricault's painting, might have been big enough for a roomful of ravers on spring break, but not for 146 men, an unfortunate woman, and a 12-year-old boy. Under the new plan, they all headed out to sea, with the raft pulled on tow ropes behind the lifeboats. For all the haste, for the first mile or so, this jerry-rigged setup worked fine. Until it didn't. The oarsmen in the lifeboats quickly realized that the lifeboats would be going nowhere if they had to pull so much dead weight to safety. The captain, fearing that the instability of the arrangement would endanger the passengers in the sturdier craft, ordered the ropes to be cut, leaving their compatriots on the raft to fend for themselves with no steering, no sails, and only a barrel of wine and a tin of biscuits by way of supplies. Alone on the open sea, the crowd on the raft, young and old, black and white, male and female, experienced and not, fought viciously and descended with astonishing speed into cannibalism. After eating their hats and belts, they started eating each other. When the raft was rescued, just 13 days later, only 15 people were left alive, 5 of them barely. One of the crew who rescued those on the raft wrote, "Those I saved had eaten human flesh for several days, and when I found them, the ropes that served as stays were covered with pieces of meat they had hung up to dry." This horror story rocked France, and the harsh light it cast on the regime threatened the newly restored monarchy. Royalist forces covered up the atrocity, publishing a notice that the 148 had been lost at sea. Until 2 of the survivors, the ship's surgeon and an engineer who can be seen in the painting conferring by the mast, wrote up an eyewitness account of life on the raft, later expanded into a book, that contradicted the official version of events. The book became a bestseller in France, which kept the callousness of the aristocracy in the headlines. As a result of this notoriety, the captain was put on trial, and his light sentence at the end of the proceedings, only 3 years in prison and not death, set off a furor. So did the nearly life-sized The Raft of the Medusa when it appeared in Paris 3 years after the wreck, as part of the Salon of 1819. In a reflection of the divided political landscape of the day, critics battled over its value, praising its timeliness, ridiculing its inaccuracies. The starving survivors looked more like refugees from a weightlifting competition. One even blamed the artist for starting a race riot, since a black man was featured in the painting's focal point. On seeing the work, Louis XVIII chose to ignore the political implications and graciously focused instead on the great accomplishment, telling the artist, "Monsieur Géricault, you've painted a shipwreck." And here the king paused, as if in anger, before wittily concluding, "which is not one for you." But a discouraged Géricault, who felt the reception hadn't met his own high expectations for the work, cut the painting from its frame and lamented, "It's not worth looking at." The Louvre and its millions of visitors would likely disagree. Today, the Raft of the Medusa, although not acquired until 1824 after the painter's death, currently occupies an entire wall in the illustrious museum. The painting is raw, complicated, and gruesome. It covers contemporary politics and history, both of painting and of France, and it took years of meticulous study, followed by feverish concentration in a remote studio to finish, and later to navigate its public reception. As such, I believe it's a perfect